6 months ago, I challenged myself to make a game in 1 year. And here we are at the halfway point. So there are some questions to be asked. How is development going? Am I on track to get the game done by the end of the year? Can I continue at the same pace that I have been for the next 6 months? And is that even enough to complete the game in time? I've also been doing YouTube for about 4 months, this being my 6th video. How is that going? Is that helping or hindering my game's development? First, if you don't know me already, I'm Wormer. I'm a beginner, game developer, and YouTuber. I'm currently working on the first game that I ever started to make. It was sparked by a lifelong interest in biology, in animals and ecosystems and how they interact with each other. Also, I loved playing video games as a kid, always wanted to make them but never got around to it. Also had a very basic understanding of coding. And all of this culminated in me wanting to make games that simulated ecosystems and animals changing over time and interacting with each other. So about 6 years ago, I wrote down some ideas and started learning coding, and I made my prototype for the game that you're seeing right now. While I was learning coding and learning how to use Unity, I was also taking in game dev content on YouTube. I was learning what other indies were doing, how they were doing it, and what's needed for success in this field. And what I was hearing was that you shouldn't start with a huge game, that you needed to start smaller. So I put my dream game on the back burner and started on a much smaller project. That game happily was finished, and I released it on iOS about a year ago. There isn't much to say about it, but I'll put a link in the description if you'd like to see it. I mistakenly said in my first video that Please Feed the Fish was my first game ever, but I should have clarified that it was the first game that I'd ever started to make, and it's the first game that I hope to release on Steam. The game that I released last year on iOS was very small. It's almost not a game, it's more like an app, and as I'll come to explain, it didn't do very well. So Please Feed the Fish feels like my first real game, my first attempt at making a commercially successful game. Finishing a game and releasing it felt really good. It was a struggle because I knew very little about Unity, about coding, about building games in general. More than that, it was a struggle because I had a full-time job. I had other hobbies and responsibilities that left me with very little time to spend on my game. Oftentimes it was late into the night before I had to get up early the next day. The struggle was finding time here and there to learn and work on my game. I'm not much of a tutorial watcher or a course doer, but those are of course where I started, but once I knew enough to get my hands dirty, I just dove in and started making something, and I learned as I went. But if you remember, I said that this journey started 6 years ago, and my game was released about 1 year ago. So it took me a long time to make this game. While I did have stretches where I would work on the game for a few months at a time, there were much longer stretches where I didn't work on the game, sometimes over a year. I had these huge swings of motivation. One day I would think that I could push through, work on this game for a few more months and get it done. Other times I would think that it would never get done. Sometimes I felt that so much time had passed since I had last worked on the game that it wasn't even worth going back to. This graph represents my game dev journey. It's embarrassing to admit, but it took me 5 years to finish my first game. And as you can see, I spent more time not working on it. All of this time, I still had these other ideas for games, including my fish game, in my head. And I knew that if I didn't finish my first game, that none of my other games would ever see the light of day. It made me sad to think about. I felt my future games slipping away every day. Along with finishing the game, releasing the game publicly was important to me. I didn't need to make money from this game, but I wanted to learn something about how I could make money. Working for myself has always been very appealing and interesting to me, so I wanted that to be part of my first game dev experience. So I finally buckled down and worked for about 4 months and got it done last year, and it's been released for about a year now. It got a few downloads, but as far as I can tell, no one really played it. According to my analytics, not many people made it very far past the tutorial. Now this was disappointing. I knew it was going to be hard, if not impossible, to break into the mobile market, but I really didn't have high hopes in the first place, so it wasn't devastating. I had nothing staked or invested into the game besides my personal time. Though this game took me far longer than it should have, and I made $0 from it, I don't regret making it. I learned a lot from it. I learned that I could start and complete a game. As someone who has started and not finished many things, this felt like an accomplishment. I also learned that I do enjoy making games. I often wondered while making my first game if I really enjoyed the work. There were definitely days that I hated. There were things I didn't want to do because they were difficult or boring. And of course, there were those stretches of time where I couldn't even make myself work on the game, sometimes for over a year. And I wondered, if I did manage to make this into my career, would I be happy doing it? And I learned that the answer was yes. And I would say this is the most important lesson I learned. I could look at my next project and the prospect of doing this work for years with a lot more confidence. Enjoying my work is really important to me, but making my first game taught me that a huge part of the joy of making games is watching people play your game. Seeing people who enjoy it. The process of making a game is fun and satisfying, but it pales in comparison with seeing anyone, play and enjoy your game. And that was something I didn't get from my first game. So I learned the importance of two things that I had completely neglected for this first game: marketing and testing. I had a few friends test the game for bugs, but I didn't know how to research the market to know if this game would be fun or popular. I didn't test the game with a wide audience to see if it would appeal to people. I barely even tested the game to see if it was fun. I merely made the game how I thought it needed to be made. I also spent zero time marketing or spreading the word about my game. I knew that neglecting these things would only hinder the success of my game. Not that I needed it to be a huge success, but I just didn't see how it was possible for me to do all of these things. My most important goal was simply to finish the game. If I couldn't do that, then nothing else really mattered. After finishing my first game, I did take a short break, but after that, I began on my next project. And it felt natural to go back to something that I had already started on, something I was still interested in, my fish game. It only existed as a prototype, but in my head and on paper, it existed as this huge game. But remembering the lesson that I had learned from my first game, the reason why I switched away from this game, I took that prototype and imagined a much smaller game, something that I could complete in a reasonable amount of time. And the reasonable amount of time that I chose was 1 year. I couldn't spend another 4 or 5 years or longer working on another game. Looking back at the development log of my first game, I saw that if I condensed all of the work that I did, erasing all of the time that I didn't work on the game, I could have finished the game within 6 months or so. Maybe shorter if I had more hours to work on it in the day. I knew my fish game would take more hours than that game, being just a larger game and having more content and things to do. So a year felt like a reasonable amount of time, especially if I was able to increase the amount of work that I was able to do per day. And of course, stick with it for a whole year. My work schedule recently went from full-time to part-time, so this felt like a reasonable thing for me to accomplish. Longer than a year felt like too much of a stretch for my track record of motivation, and also didn't make sense for my second project. I wanted to keep that second project small. I do hope to make a few dollars off of this game, but spending more than a year on one project at this point feels like too much of a time investment, especially when my balance of profiting off of my games stands at $0. So with the lessons learned from my first game, I knew that I needed to do things differently. If I wanted people to actually play and enjoy my game, I needed to get the word out. I needed to find people to test the game and give me feedback and make sure that the game was as good as it could be. That's where YouTube came in. After about 2 months of development on my game, I started posting devlogs, and my first video performed far beyond what I expected it to. I wouldn't say it went viral, but a lot more people saw me and my game than I ever expected to at that point. By my second video, I already had 1,000 subscribers, which was amazing to me. I can't take all of the credit for this. The game dev community is so encouraging and supportive. We all want each other to succeed, and we're happy to follow each other's journeys. So thank you so much for your support and encouragement and feedback so far. It's been invaluable, and it's everything that I can hope for from YouTube. None of my videos have performed as well as my first one. My second best performing video was a discussion about that general game dev topic, and the rest are devlogs. This tells me that my game, or the way that I do devlogs, could be more interesting. It's valuable information because I believe it translates into how well the game itself could be received when it's completed. If videos about my game aren't interesting, then how can I hope to sell it? So it's all a valuable experience in the field of marketing. I do plan to continue making devlogs with the goal of making my game and the way I do devlogs more interesting over time, according to the feedback that I receive. I'll likely make more videos about game development in general as well, since those tend to perform a little better. So I have over 1,000 subscribers now. Does that mean that I make money off of my videos? Not quite. As of right now, I have about a third of the watch hours needed to become monetized. So I need to keep making videos and improve the quality over time if I hope to get there. I will admit, YouTube is definitely on a back burner. Getting monetized on YouTube isn't nearly as important to me as working on my game. So I'm not spending very much time making videos. I would say it's less than 10% of the total time that I spend on everything game dev related. I can barely get one video out per month, and that's with very little editing. I don't have a cool setup for filming my videos. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm in my bedroom. I've tried a few different angles, and this is a new one. So that's something I hope to improve over time. Maybe I can get some cool collectible things and some lighting in the background like other people have. But again, that's not very high on my list of priorities. My main goals for YouTube are, one, to find people to give me feedback on my game, which I have found so far. So thank you very much for your comments and your feedback on my videos. Second, to find people who might be interested in buying my game when it's done. And this is proving to be more difficult. I have been trying to make my videos appealing to both game developers and gamers, but I believe the core of my audience are the former game developers, which is why I'm making this video, because it's likely to be interesting to you. But I will keep trying with other types of videos to hopefully reach my target audience for my game. So how is development going? Half of my time is gone. Have I developed half of the game? Let's put it this way. No. It's hard to say exactly what percentage complete the game is done. I tend to break down my game's development into sections. There's content, which includes all of the fish models and their intermediate evolutionary forms and the environment levels. Also sound effects and music. There are systems, which in that I include all of the coding behind the fish behavior and evolution, along with the UI and save systems. Then there's testing and polishing. Work has been done in all of these areas, but I wouldn't say that any of them are at the 50% mark quite yet. For the environment and fish models, I would say I'm somewhere between a quarter and a third completed for that. I haven't started on sound effects yet, and I've only barely scratched the surface of music. Parts of the systems seem pretty solid at this point, but I know that they will need expansion and tweaking as I build the game out. The UI is in a prototypical state, and it will need to be completely overhauled with new graphics, and I'm sure changed as feedback comes in. Then there's testing. The gameplay itself has had a very small amount of testing, which is probably the weakest point in development. I've had some awesome testers join me on Discord. Huge shout out to Jeff, Yash, Unscripted Logic, Tetravalence, and Chimerat. Sorry if I mispronounced any of your names. I was supposed to ask you that. But your feedback has been invaluable, and it's made my game better so far. These guys are all game devs with more experience than I have, and they've been super helpful and supportive. So join us over on Discord. We're creating a community of game devs who help each other make their games. So pretty awesome so far. But the game needs more testing now, and no doubt will need a lot more as development continues. Then there's polish. This is an area where I would say if something was furthest along, this would be it. There's more work to do, obviously, but I spent a considerable amount of time figuring out the level of polish that my game needs early on. And this was important to me because it takes a load off of the polishing towards the end of development. And it gives me a much better idea of how long the rest of the game's development will take. I would rather cut content out of the game and structure the entire game's development based on how much time I have left, instead of trying to cram a bunch of polish at the end after having made way too much content. It also allows for a better looking game that I can show off earlier than if I had waited on the polishing. This is somewhat counterintuitive because it should be the gameplay that attracts people, and that's something that I'm working on, and hopefully that catches up with the level of polish very soon. This brings me to a secondary goal that I had hoped to accomplish by now, and that is having a Steam page up. I had hoped to have my Steam page up for at least 6 months before releasing the game, but it just hasn't happened yet. The demo and the game's polish needs a little bit more work, and the overall gameplay just needs more work, and I'm not ready to launch my Steam page yet. I'm very close, and it will be a top priority in the next few weeks. So overall, I am behind schedule, and I can't say that I'm very surprised at this. Almost everything that I'm doing is completely new to me. I learned 3D modeling for this game. I learned how to use Unity's terrain system. Much of the coding are new concepts to me. On top of that, I've made mistakes that have caused me to have to redo some of my work, particularly with those 3 areas: the modeling, the fish, the terrain, and the coding. But every time I redo something, I learn of a faster and easier way to redo it. So I'm confident that these experiences of redoing work will help me to make the rest of the content for my game much more efficiently. Another factor is that things just take a lot longer than expected. As an example, this video, which should have come out a month ago at the 6-month mark, is a month late, coming out in August. So I'm behind even with my video making. But that is the whole reason I gave myself a time limit. It may be the case that I need to take what I have, all of the fish models and environment and code, and make a smaller game than I originally imagined out of what I have so far. My ultimate goal is to release something at the end of the year, and I would rather scope down what I have now and complete a smaller project instead of coming to the end of the year and find that what I had originally scoped was impossible for a year. But like I said, that's why I chose to give myself a time limit so that I could reassess at the halfway point and better plan the second half. So far, over the past 6 months, I've averaged about 11 hours per week working on my game. And this has been a fairly comfortable pace for me. I still have time to spend with my family. I still have time for hobbies and recreation. I could still play video games and watch movies and go on vacation, along with taking care of other responsibilities that I have. Will I have to work more in the next 6 months than I have been to complete the game on time? Probably yes. My goal for the next 6 months is to bump up my weekly average to 15 or more, and hopefully this will be just enough to get the game done. This is still reasonable for me and my family. It'll probably just mean cutting out some video game playing or movie watching or something. While I would like this to be my full-time career someday, I'm not willing to spend much more time than I have been on it. And this was a factor in determining how long I would spend on this game and how big the project would be. We hear a lot of stories of game developers who basically sacrificed years of their lives to make their games. They risked their finances, their relationships, their mental health to make their game. And hearing these stories sometimes makes me feel that I'm not as passionate about game development as they are. I wonder, can I even succeed at this by not being as dedicated as they are? But I have to remind myself that these examples are outliers. There are many examples of people who have made game development their lifelong career by being balanced, not risking everything to make their game. And I hope to one day be one of those examples. We may not hear about them as often, and their stories might not be as glamorous, but I have to believe it's possible because that's just not my story. Another thing to talk about is my motivation. As I showed you earlier, my motivation has gone up and down with past projects and caused huge delays in development of my games. Throughout my life, whenever I've started something, I always have this doubt in my mind that I'll probably just give up in a few months. So what's the point of even starting? These past 6 months have been the longest streak of game development that I've done throughout my whole 6 years of game development, and I do feel that I can go 6 more months. YouTube has been a big help. Having people looking forward to the development of the game and seeing more of it and giving me feedback and support has definitely been a strong motivating factor. Having a time limit has helped as well. It helps me not to get bogged down with perfectionism or adding scope to my game. and completing the game within the time frame has felt fairly reasonable all along. One more thing I'd like to mention is that I have made my first dollar as a game developer, my first 5 actually, and that was over on Patreon. So thank you, Kayla, for being my first patron. Patreon is another back burner item. It's an experiment that I hope to learn more about. I consider my game to be funded because I have a job that supports its development. I haven't staked anything on its success. I don't need this game to make money. So Patreon support isn't necessary for me to complete my game. So it's more of a place for me to offer a bit more than YouTube can offer. Like I said, it's an experiment, so please let me know if there's anything you'd like to see on there. I hope this has been enlightening wherever you are on your game dev journey. If you're just starting out or you're in a similar place as me, let me know in the comments, let all of us know. And please feel free to join my Discord if you're looking for a place to get feedback on your game and just talk to other game developers who are friendly and supportive. Please join us there. There is a free demo on itch.io for my game, Please Feed the Fish. You don't have to give me feedback. You can just play it for fun. Hopefully it is fun. Maybe you could just tell me that. If it's not fun, just tell me that in the comment. At least I would know that. I hope you look forward to more devlogs about Please Feed the Fish and updates about my game dev journey. If you haven't seen my previous devlogs, here's a link to a playlist with all of them. Thanks for watching.